Before I turn it over to our team, I wanted to do a quick introduction on our panelists today. So from Fair Credit Foundation, we have Talon Larson and Mackenzie Walsh. From Utah Community Action, we have Heather Lester. Brian Neva is here on behalf of Community Development Corporation of Utah. And we have Rob Roque from NeighborWorks Salt Lake. We also have Kevin Austin, who's here from the Road Home. And last but definitely not least, we have Heidi Lund from Life Start Village. So thank you all for joining us, and let's get started. I'm going to turn it over to Mackenzie.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ellen, and thank you to everyone who is participating, whether you are here to get some questions answered or whether you are here as a panelist. We really, really appreciate your time. And so we're going to dive in. Before we do, I wanted to just kind of discuss why we decided to do this topic. Not only is it Fair Housing and Financial Literacy Month, but it is a hot topic in regards to housing. Affordable housing by HUD is defined as 30% of your income. So it's very difficult for a lot of Utahns, or really just in general, for us to find affordable housing, and that it can be a cost burden when it is more than that amount. So that, as well as some other concerns that are obstacles that are brought up with housing, such as insufficient savings, whether that is in the purchase of a home or in the purchase of or the preparation of a rental, and then some other obstacles like eviction, or you have poor credit, so it's a lack of borrowing opportunity to become a homeowner or to get out of a current rental that you are in and want a different one. And last but not least, some past utility bills or other debts and bills that are causing you to not be able to move forward in your housing situation. So we're going to discuss some of these things, but for sure, I wanted to, I've asked ahead of time some individual questions to each of these panelists, and I'm going to start with the topic of home ownership. So right now, I don't know if any of you are in the search of purchasing a home, but the housing market is very, very hot. It's tricky to find a home, as well as it's tricky to find a home in your price range. So I have asked both Rob from NeighborWorks, and is it Brian? Is that how you pronounce your name? Okay, I just want to make sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. I asked both of them if they had any advice to those who are in the search of a home right now, in this hot market. What would they say in terms of purchasing at this time? So I'm going to have Rob go first, and then right after you're done, Rob, if you'll give your tips.
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is an incredible housing market right now. And what I would say, and not only coming from a nonprofit that works in creating new homeowners, and as somebody that just bought a house, miraculously, I would say, really, in retrospect, the number one tip that I would give somebody is educate yourself. That means homebuyer education. That means understanding your own finances, but also the process of buying a home. It is a complicated process, and it is, it'll force you to take a really good hard look at what affordability means to you. And aside from just that being an important step in this, and something that I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about, becoming financially capable, the reason why that is such an important thing in a hot housing market is because you are going to run into folks that don't care whether or not you buy a house that you can afford. They see markets like this and they are less scrupulous. That may be a real estate agent, that may be a lender, that may be somebody telling you what you want to hear versus what, with your own personal expertise, you will be able to know one way or another. You'll be able to know what your household really can afford. You need to be the expert on your home purchase. And at the very least, look for help for people that don't have a dog in the race. Look for folks that are a nonprofit that that aren't interested in whether or not you buy a house today, but more interested in making you make the right decision for your household.
Thanks, Rob. Brian, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. I guess first off, thank you, Ellen, Mackenzie, AAA for credit for inviting us to have a seat at this virtual table and be a part of a conversation along with the other experts. And to add my 2 cents, in my opinion, we're definitely facing one of the most difficult markets. And I would say the biggest barriers are the fact that there's low inventory. We're definitely in historic low inventory compared to all the previous years. Expensive home prices affecting affordability, especially for low-income households, and the bidding wars. So all those things can certainly be discouraging, disappointing to buy now. However, we do have to keep in mind that real estate is cyclical and the market should adjust at some point. The problem is that we don't know when. And so, it's like a suspense that we have to deal with. But my advice for those that are looking to purchase right now and that are not finding anything in the meantime is to have patience and consistent preparation, kind of along the lines of what Rob was saying. Educate yourself, inform yourself, and prepare yourself to position yourself to have the best chances to purchase when a better time comes. And this includes 3 things: staying in control of your finances, keep a strong budget, decrease your expenses, avoid high credit card balances, and then also improving your credit score for optimal interest rate and loan terms. In the long run, this could definitely save you thousands of dollars in financing costs. And I would say the third one would be to adjust your housing goals. If you really want to purchase now or in the near future, you may need to consider compromising for a smaller property or different property type, such as a townhome or condo, where you can afford more and be more competitive. If it's not for you, then you may want to wait. After all, like, I'm in the same boat. I'm actually considering buying now, and first I was thinking maybe I'll do a single family home, and now I'm definitely adjusting to maybe just a townhome for the time being. And keep in mind that this doesn't have to be your forever home. A lot of people put that as the first goal. Hey, this has to be my one and only. But hey, just look for a starter home, get some equity, and then that'll help you in the long run to get into a better home, your dream home.
Awesome. Thank you too. And we'll circle back because I definitely want both of you to talk a little bit more on the housing education and how we can educate ourselves as we prepare for home ownership and what resources that your nonprofits might provide. But I want to now kind of go on the rental side of things for a minute. One thing that is going on right now is the eviction moratorium. Those who are at risk of eviction during especially the COVID-19 pandemic. So I have asked Heather Lester over from Utah Community Action to give us some tips and tricks as to if we are facing eviction or in fear of facing eviction, what are some strategies that she would recommend us to take? So Heather, if you'll give us those.
Absolutely. Tips and tricks. That's awesome. I think it's difficult. There's always difficulty in renting with relationships and evictions and the different types of evictions and how to sustain and stabilize in your housing, even prior to COVID. And so since COVID, there's good changes and bad changes. I know it's hard to look at the good changes. The good thing now is there's a lot of rental assistance funds that's available. There's been several different types of moratoriums, and blanketly saying that the moratorium provides coverage for everyone is actually false. And so it's always a daily conversation when I work with people, because they assume that because of COVID, because of the pandemic, they can't be evicted. And so without going into a long drawn out on that, there's a confusion because there was, well, what's the difference between an eviction stay, an eviction moratorium, and a declaration, which is actually what's in effect right now is the declaration. So understanding that a moratorium or any of these things did not pause or take away the rents that are due, It just alleviated some of the standards and restrictions and requirements to pay in full, allowed people to make partial payments, those types of things. So the moratoriums that were in place, there was a Utah one, there was a federal one, there's a foreclosure one, and then currently, of course, the CDC declaration is what has been in place, was going to expire end of the year, the end of May, and now it's been postponed until the end of June. But what that does is it's a declaration, and they have to be COVID affected. They have to show a COVID related crisis, which basically I don't know how you can't throw a nickel without hitting a COVID crisis at this point. But regardless of that, there's a declaration that has to be attested to. And so it's not just everyone's covered, but it's everyone has to do this declaration, provide it to their landlord, and show that coverage that they attest that these requirements are actually what's happening with their rental situation. So educating is huge on that because it doesn't cover nuisances and it doesn't cover like lease terminations. It doesn't cover end of lease type of scenarios. I mean, it's really just circle around pay or vacate because a lot of people are definitely within the crisis of being unemployed, underemployed, etc. So basically just number one, in engulfing that and using that to the advantage, but also outside of that, the tips and tricks that I would always advise is actually communicating with your landlord. I know if you're in crisis, likely they're in crisis. If you haven't paid your rent, they haven't paid their mortgage. Depending on the type of landlord it is, I do work with both. And so I'm kind of afforded that lens to see both sides of it. And there are a lot of landlords in trouble as well. And that comes back to mortgages, foreclosures, forbearances, those types of things that I think need to actually have a little bit of leverage and a little bit of discussion because bigger landlords, sometimes it just assumes that your apartment number rather than a certain name. And so it's really getting in there, digesting the situation, determining, yes, there's funds. This can be, there is assistance available and discussing that with both sides of the situation. So there's a lot of tenants in trouble right now and accessing the funds is something I'm sure we'll go into further in this presentation, but just understanding that the funds are available, the coverage for rental assistance, including fees and deposits and such are available. It's just a matter of accessing and then making sure that relationship, it is a two-party scenario where they have to work together. So that's a lot of what I do on a daily basis. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's basically what
Yeah, no, that was perfect, Heather. Okay. Thank you. And yeah, we are going to get, and we had some prior questions come in about assistance, both in rental and down payment assistance for home buying. So we're definitely going to get to that. So I appreciate it. I also appreciate that you brought up something that I have been very confused on, which is, that not all evictions are standard or covered by that COVID, moratorium that we have been dealing with over the last year. And that being the case, because evictions are still taking place and they're going to continue to take place, and as people might experience homelessness or that fear of homelessness, and where do I go if I am evicted and I don't have housing, we have asked Kevin Austin from the Road Home to speak about what he would recommend when someone is experiencing recent homelessness and doesn't know where to go. So can you, I'm so scared I'm going to call you Austin instead of Kevin because you have two first names. And so I hope I just get that right. So Kevin, will you talk on that?
Yeah, of course. I do have two first names. It happens all the time. I get called Austin more often than not, so don't worry.
I feel your pain.
I kind of just want to piggyback off a little bit of what Heather said. Heather is such a great resource in the community and is really able to help a lot of individuals avoid these evictions, or at least give them tools to navigate through around it. At the Road Home, we are trying really hard and making a lot of attempts to try and limit people who are even like close to experiencing homelessness, so that we can just avoid the episode of homelessness altogether. And we operate a program specifically for veterans a homeless prevention program for veterans. And we, since the pandemic started, we have been averaging about 10 new households a month and about $25,000 a month that we're spending on helping individuals, prevent an episode of homelessness. So the eviction moratorium literally doesn't cover much. And like Heather said, the landlords also have to pay their mortgages. And so there's things that just need to happen. But if an eviction really does happen and the household doesn't have a safe or suitable place to go, whether it's, couch surfing with friends or family or anything like that, and they do find themselves in a position where, they're going to be sleeping on the street or something, then obviously we want to invite them to visit one of our shelters. In Salt Lake County, we have a lot more, but we essentially have 5 resource centers for individuals or families that are experiencing homelessness. One of them is specifically for youth, and so that one is kind of that one operates a little bit differently than the other ones. But there is 2 shelters in downtown Salt Lake. One that is specifically for women, and that's the Geraldine E. King Resource Center. It's on 700 South and 200 East-ish. And then there's another one, the Gail Miller Resource Center is on like 300 West and like 1200 South. Don't quote me on these addresses. And then there's one in South Salt Lake on 3300 South and like 10th West. Really, if you find yourself in a situation where you don't have a place to stay, the best thing to do is to call 211 initially. They will help refer that household to most likely UCA or Utah Community Action at first. Well, they will complete a diversion assessment, and a lot of that is just, is there anywhere else that you can sleep tonight other than coming into shelter? There is a lot of, especially recently, there's been a lot of studies released that shows, even one day of homelessness for a child can really create some long-term barriers for them, just moving forward as they're growing up and doing things on their own. And so we are trying to limit homelessness as much as possible, trying to find other places for them to stay, regardless of the shelter. But if they do find themselves at a space where they don't have another place to go other than shelter, UCA will coordinate with all of those resource centers to determine what kind of availability is out there. As I'm sure a lot of people that are participating in this call have seen, there is a really big number of homeless people that are sleeping outside. And one of the components to that, and I'm not going to prescribe that it's the biggest, but one of the components to that is in late 2019, our system on how our community provides services to homeless people shifted from the big downtown shelter on 210 Rio Grande, where that had the capacity for about, I think we were seeing nights of about 1,400 single individuals were residing in that shelter. And now with the different system, with the 3 resource centers that are specifically for singles, we can only serve like about 800 people. So we lost about 600 beds in the transition to the new system. And so, I'm all over the place, but if the household finds themselves sleeping on the street or at risk of sleeping on the street, getting a call to 211, probably getting a referral to UCA, and UCA will work with the resource centers to see if there's available beds. If there's not, we are also operating some hotels for vulnerable populations. So anybody who is over the age of 60 or has some conditions that would be put them at higher risk for contracting COVID or having an adverse reaction or a big reaction to COVID. We have some hotels available for those individuals and families. But really the biggest thing is probably contacting Utah Community Action, figuring out where they can stay that night. And then also, I think one thing that I would advocate for is if you're talking to somebody, or somebody who is close to having to stay in shelter or is there already, I would encourage them a lot to engage with case management as early as possible. There is some pretty large and fully resourced case management teams at each of these resource centers. And so I know a lot of times, especially for first-time homeless individuals or families, there's a lot of pride and people are embarrassed by it. And so a lot of times they'll be a little bit resistant to accepting the assistance from the case managers at each of these different resource centers. And I get it. I would be embarrassed. I would feel, I wouldn't feel good. And so reaching out to help isn't always the easiest thing to do, but that would be my suggestion. That was a lot. I'm really sorry. That's what happens when you have 2 first names.
No apologies, Kevin. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. I love that some of the collaboration or some of the resources that we use are all together here right now. So thank you. And we will definitely circle back because I have some more questions to ask you, and I'm sure some of the audience will later as well. But I wanted to touch on another topic, which is that there are plenty of resources out there available to help people out of homelessness or in that transitional housing period of time where they were maybe once homeless and now are trying to gain stable housing again, but are trying to go over those barriers. And so we've invited one of those types of programs here with us today, and that is Heidi Lund from Lifestart Village. So if Heidi, will you explain your program and explain kind of the process and the different phases and how one would apply and if they're able to apply, that kind of a thing. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, my name's Heidi, and thank you so much for having me. I love doing stuff like this. I actually use a lot of the people here as resources for us. So Lifestart Village, so we're part of the Family Support Center. Lifestart Village is it's like a self-sufficiency program for single parents. We do many different things here. So we have 46 units in our little village is what we like to call it. We have 2 different phases. So in phase 1 of Lifestart, it's the co-housing setup, but you get your own apartment, but a shared kitchen for the rest of the house. So we have 2 and 3 bedroom apartments that come fully furnished for families. We provide everything that they need for their first 30 days here, just in case if they come into our program with no services. Part of the requirements to get into our program is you have to have about 6 months of sobriety, and you have to have custody of, not necessarily custody, because we work with a lot of families with DCFS and other things. So you have to have children between the ages of 0 and 12 to qualify in phase 1. In phase 1 of the program, you can stay here for up to 2 years. And when you come into our program, we do an assessment with you and kind of figure out what we can do here to support you. So say you have past evictions and you can't find anyone to rent to you. So we're going to make sure we start working on that right when you come into our program. If you don't have a high school diploma or GED, we'll start working on that. If you're lacking basic job skills, we have different classes for that. We really try to meet people where they're at when they come in. Our base, our lowest rent is $350, but we never go above $500 in phase 1. So we try to keep it low for people if they have past debts and anything that they can start paying off different stuff. You do have to have a source of income to come into our facility, but that can be like, we've worked with the Road Home a lot where they have rapid rehousing that will come in and that can place the families here. DCFS involvement, they can help with paying rent with some of our families. Say you're working just like a 20-hour-a-week job, we can work with that. Just some form of income to get into the program. See what else, phase 2. So you can move to phase 2 of our program where you have your own apartment, and we're not in your business as much, I'd like to say, because you've been through the program, you're stably, like you're working stable, and that's your own apartment, and they're 2 bedrooms. And out there, we just really ask for you to continue to work on your life, continue to better it. So let's really focus on your credit. Do you want to go back to school? Let's support you with that. Let's get you set up with it. We try to help people get across barriers that would prevent them from being successful without us. We do ongoing drug testing just to make sure we have a safe community. And yeah, we do so many different things out here. It's crazy to kind of explain it all. So right now our waiting list is about maybe 30 days to get in, just depending on the family size. Sometimes we can even get you in sooner than that. But I would just, yeah, turn an application. We would love to have you part of the program. We always set up with like a tour so you guys can see exactly what we're asking of you and if this is a good fit for your family. Because I don't want anyone to get in over their head here, because we do ask you to start working after so long, if that's something you want to do, or start school after 90 days. We want to make sure you're actively participating in bettering your life. So we're like that motivation. We do weekly case management, like house meetings and all kinds of just different stuff here. So hopefully that helps.
Yes, thank you, Heidi. I love that there are opportunities and that there are villages, particularly your village, that people can use as a resource to help them not just obtain housing, but like you said, to further their education or to further their employment, and that they have the support of others around them as they do it. So thank you for explaining
Yes,
that.
families can stay here for about 5 years or longer, depending if they're in school. And I was once homeless. I actually used the road home to help me move in here as a client 9 years ago with my kids. And
Look at you now, you're an
yeah, I
executive
purchased my
director.
house a couple years ago through these guys. So, I mean, our end goal is to make sure we can, it used to be to purchase a house, but I don't like to say that right now because the odds are against them because of the housing market. So whatever, yeah, we just want to help them in whatever it looks like. So
Perfect. Well, thank you, Heidi. And we'll circle back because I know there's lots of questions. So I have one more panelist I wanted to ask a question that was pre-written, and then we're going to open up for the live chat. Please keep your videos off if you aren't a participant. But I wanted Talon, my coworker, to address a big concern that a lot of people have, which is my credit is poor. I can't get a home. I can't get into an apartment. What are some fast or quick strategies that I can do in order to do that? So I've asked him to briefly discuss what we do at Fair Credit, as well as what he would recommend for those individuals.
Awesome. Thanks, Mackenzie. Yeah, so honestly, the first starting point is to know where you're at. A lot of times people don't know what their credit situation even looks like. They may have a credit score that they were given from a potential lender or after getting rejected from applying for an apartment. And so really let's first dive in and focus on what is on your credit report. And what we can do is take a look together and come up with a game plan of figuring out, okay, what can be done. And there's so many different things. You almost have to look at it as two sides of the same coin of if there is debt, let's work on paying that down. At the beginning, Ellen mentioned some of our programs, including our debt management program and our Credit Gazelle payday loan refinance programs. To pay down some of those different debts in a rapid manner, right? That's a little bit more affordable. But on the flip side too, let's look at active ways to build your credit, such as seeing if we can't get you approved for a secured credit card, or piggybacking off of a trusted family member or friend off of some of their accounts. Becoming an authorized user in that way. So a lot of this is done together, right? We can coach you through the process, work alongside with you, and kind of help instruct you on what can be done to get you into that range that you do start qualifying for mortgages, for getting into an apartment, those types of things. So really it boils down to first figuring out where you're at, and then that's where we can take a look again at the roadmap and figure out what the best path is moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Talon. I feel like you should be the MC because you have more of the setup MC with the mic and like the backdrop. Like, you look great. I've just got my guest room lamp and my
That's a
Video
nice
games
looking
are
lamp
cooler.
though. Hey, nothing wrong with video games.
Great. Well,
I'm in the
I would
back
love
room.
for the, yeah. What, say that you're in a bathroom, is that what you said?
No, I said I put myself in the back room at work,
Oh, in
so
the
I
back room.
to kind of eliminate the noise, just because I'm like, I need to find somewhere to set this up. So
Well, I think that's one thing that we've all been able to learn with Zoom and the pandemic is how to just make things work with where we're at. So I'm grateful for all of your help in that way. So I'd love to open it up. Like I mentioned, please keep your videos off if you're not a panelist, just so that we can keep this private. But please feel free to enter in the chat any questions that you have for our panelists. And I know particularly as well that there is one individual here today through IRC that has a resource that we would love to be able to talk about as well. But let's answer any questions, and then Brady, I'm going to have you chat here for a minute or go off of mute. But do we have any specific questions relating renting or buying a home that we can address before we go over some more? Please feel free to chat or put them in the chat. Or if you need to unmute yourself, but just don't go off video, that's fine as well.
I'll start us off with a question that came up just the other day amongst some of us, and maybe some of the panelists would be able to answer. So we know when it comes to mortgages, when you're applying for a mortgage, that when those hard inquiries hit your report, if you do it within a month or so, that it's not as detrimental to your credit. But how does that work with apartments? Is it the same concept? We weren't 100% sure on that, and so wanted to throw that out there. If anyone has an answer to that.
I'm definitely interested in knowing too. It's actually a good question.
Wait, was the question is whether like applying for an apartment, if that hits your credit score, like applying for a mortgage?
Not necessarily. So if you, with a mortgage, if you check, like go to different lenders, only the one inquiry technically goes against your credit. So you could have multiple inquiries and it wouldn't be just this compounding negativity towards your credit. But we were wondering if it's the same if you were applying for different apartments, that you could be applying for multiple apartments, having multiple credit pulls, and if that would have an effect.
Well, it's a great idea. I know in the state legislature, it didn't pass, but they did have a bill that was raised to do exactly what you're saying, like essentially just run your application for an apartment once a month, and you can take that application or the results of that application to every other apartment that you want to apply to. But that is not the case, right? This second, people do have to just apply at every different place, and they go through their own background check processes, but an application that was completed by one apartment complex in South Salt Lake would not translate to an apartment complex in downtown Salt Lake, if that makes sense.
I can speak to that too a little bit. So it doesn't, and he's right, there definitely was legislation out there that was supposed to make possibly one poll and then a universal background credit report. Like you said, it didn't pass. It's a good idea, and I hope it doesn't die completely. What I have actually heard, though, is it depends on how they pull them. Sometimes different apartment complexes are managed by the same folks. So like whether you have EMG, Cowboy, whoever, sometimes they can just cross-pollinate to see different units if you apply within the same agency. But a lot of times people don't want to go if they get denied with that particular agency, depending on one of their barriers. So one thing that I've actually found, and a landlord told me this, it was a bigger landlord, when you get the credit report pulled and you do it's a hard inquiry, if you take that and there's usually a transaction number, it's worked for some folks so they don't have to keep getting hits. because then they could just do a soft inquiry within a certain period of time. I believe it's 30 days. Don't quote me on that. But there's a transaction ID for like TransUnion, Equifax, Experian, whatever, and you can give them that and they can pull it from their database. But again, it does matter on who's pulling it and what they're trying to pull. So if it's just a credit or if it's a full background, sometimes it does pull differently and it can give multiple hits. You just have to kind of inquire how they do it, if that helps at all.
No, that was great. And Melissa in the chat has brought up a good point, which is that not all applications, rental applications, are going to be considered a hard pull. In fact, that's something I always recommend to clientele is, if they can ask what type, if the company knows if it's going to be a hard inquiry or a soft inquiry. But it's interesting because a lot of times they'll say that they don't know, which I would always just assume that it's you're not going to be in your favor in that aspect at that point. But yes, yeah, that is definitely true. So was there any other like live questions before I go and do some more of the pre ones? Yeah, Heidi, go ahead.
What is the max amount that somebody can charge them for a credit check or an application fee?
Oh, I don't know that.
We don't charge anything here. I'm just wondering because like I have people that want to move past here and I just see a variety of different
Costs.
I remember when I was looking for a place like a long time ago, it was like 20, 25 bucks. I'm seeing like 45 plus.
I mean, going down the whole rabbit hole of fees, and we could have a field day with that one, but we won't. Main thing is there's really not a throttle. I've seen them upwards of 20 bucks. I've seen them upwards of 75, but then it's a certain amount for maybe a credit report / criminal background check, eviction report, pull. It just kind of depends. They usually focus all on one report, but sometimes they're using different agencies that are doing it. So maybe it doesn't give you a hard or soft credit hit, but then they use a certain like state system that will just pull eviction reports or whatever. So there's a really bad leases out there that they charge you multiple times for different things, but averagely it's application fee includes usually the background check and the credit. I would say, like I said, there's no governor, there's no threshold, there's no document that says you can't charge this much. Averagely, I would say it's anywhere between 45 and 70, to be honest. I don't know if that's what you're seeing too, Kevin, but you get a $25 one, though, run with that. That'd be great.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, by the time you find a place, it's hundreds in sometimes. It's crazy.
One recommendation that I might make for our clients and applicants out there is you should have a copy of your credit report anyways. It is a really good idea for your own just personal finance to check it periodically and see. It can't hurt to ask if you can provide them with a copy of your credit report. Then you're not worried about the security of giving your social to 10 different landlords so they can pry into your business. You've got the secured copy that you know what you're giving them, and it could potentially save them money too, because the credit reports are going to cost them to pull too. So just depending on whether or not it would be up to their preference. Some bigger companies may require that, they use their system because it's part of their protocols, but can't hurt to ask.
It really does work. I'm glad you brought that up, and I didn't mean to tune back in because I swear I wasn't going to say anything else for a minute, but that really, that really actually works, especially knowing that they have barriers going in before they pay the money, before they have them pull anything. Provide with your own report, provide with your own, here's the disposition of maybe my criminal barrier of something that hasn't quite been expunged on a plea in abeyance or whatever. Bring in those documents first, and it's not considered a pre-approval, but at least if you're disclosing, sometimes it does show leverage, and then you don't have to pay that fee if they can at least tell you if you're disqualified initially before the money is exchanged. So
another thing that I would say too is if you know you have issues up front, talk to a financial coach. It can't hurt to come equipped with not only your credit report, the areas that you know you need to work on, but maybe even a letter saying from your financial coach saying, we're working with them, here's their plan to remediate these issues and for long-term, budgeting and sustainability. if I were a landlord, I'd like to see that. It's proactive. So
That's a very good idea. So thank you.
yeah, come see us.
I do every Wednesday.
Okay, I want to circle back to a topic that I think is going to really benefit both those who are wanting to buy or looking to buy in the future or near future, as well as those who are renting, and that's the topic of assistance. So both on the category of down payment assistance and the grants that are available out there in terms of funding to help those get in homes, and then also, as Heather had mentioned, some, preventing evictions by helping with 1 month's rent, etc. So I'm going to first invite, we have a participant here that is from the IRC. His name is Brady. Brady, will you take a minute and explain from the IRC what the match savings that is available there?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. So I work for the IRC, or the International Rescue Committee. We primarily work with refugees, asylees, and other new Americans. So I run a program called the IDA program, which is a match savings program that can help clients pay for a home, car, education, or starting a business. Namely, for the home program, the way it works is clients can save up money. It's an IDA program. And we're actually able to combine that with other grants that we have for Salt Lake City and some different areas in Salt Lake County. So if clients are able to enroll in the program as a household, we're able to provide up to $19,000 of grant money that they do not have to pay back in order to help them reach their goals of buying a home. We also have credit building loans that have 0% interest and 0 fees that are open to anyone. They don't have to be any immigration status or country of origin is eligible for that. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of put a plug in there that I've got a lot of different resources if you have any clients that could benefit from that. So.
Thank you, Brady. I actually know of multiple people who could. Do you mind not only putting, I know you put that file in there, do you mind putting in your email or your contact information so that those who are interested in the housing, the match funding or the credit building loan, that they could access that?
Yeah, for sure. My email and phone number is also on the bottom of the flyer, but I'm going to put it in the chat here. My phone number and email, and then I'll put in a flyer here as well for the credit building loans in case anybody has questions about that.
Perfect, thank you. And I'm going to circle back now and ask Rob. Just a side note too, we have a match savings as well through Fair Credit Foundation. So feel free to reach out to us. We don't have the car loan or the credit building loan, but we do have, the car IDA portion, but we do have the matched savings for a home, business, and education as well. So thanks, Brady, for that. And I'm gonna circle back and ask Rob and then Brian right after about the down payment assistance programs or the assistance that might be available for those who are looking to buy a home in the future.
Yeah, thank you. We have a variety of down payment assistance programs, not unlike the type of program that Brady was just describing. Ours are not targeted specifically to the refugee population, but to anyone really, based off of what city you live in, what city you want to buy your house in, and then just different types of income limitations. But we have a wide variety of different down payments assistance programs that range anywhere from $15,000 to $22,000. And we get really creative with them too when we can, where we will layer those programs when it's permissible. We will work with lenders who have similar programs. We'll work with other organizations that have similar programs where we can layer that sort of stuff. So you end up with the biggest type of down payment possible. Ours are forgivable loans, which function basically like a grant that you don't have to repay if you qualify for them. And like I said, we have a wide variety, and just depending on where you live and what time you ask us and what government entity has decided to fund those at any given point. So I'd highly recommend, calling us and just say, hey, and let's just see what we qualify for, and go from there. One thing I would say with down payment assistance, right now especially, is I would be wary of anyone that charges you to identify down payment assistance programs. That is a really popular thing right now to see on the internet. They'll say, hey, there's this many programs in Utah, just click on this button. And if it's not a nonprofit, I'd be very wary, because they're going to end up trying to charge you to put you in touch with people like me, people that are in this phone call. Your lender should know about nonprofits that do down payment assistance programs, but even if they don't, seek out our information first, because we're not going to charge you. And we're going to, and I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Most of the organizations that do these down payment assistance programs, we draw from a lot of the same funding sources. So you're going to see similar programs over them. But just be wary of anybody that tries to charge you for knowledge.
That was perfect. Thank you. Because that's so big. I've seen that on my Facebook all the time. I see it all the time. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Okay, Brian, will you talk about CDCU and what, assistance that they have?
Sure. So our programs operate very similar to NeighborWorks. It's designed to help low to moderate income households. The majority of our programs are targeted to 80% of area median income. We do have one that goes up to 100%, and then you do have to be a first-time home buyer to apply and be eligible. And like Rob mentioned, city boundaries are very important. There are city limits that the funds are targeted to. So currently we have programs for Salt Lake City metropolitan area up to $14,000, and across the Salt Lake County it's up to $10,000, and Taylorsville is $10,000 as well. And they are deferred loans, no payments, no interest, forgivable after 5 years. And we also work with any lender that has a client that needs the funds and they don't have enough savings. So I think there's been a few occasions where we've been able to layer funds with NeighborWorks. I can at least remember one transaction in my time. And especially now, it's very important to try to use all the resources you can, because again, there's a lot of competition out there, and these types of assistance make it much more affordable for the clients, for you, to have a lower payment. And in some instances, you can even remove mortgage insurance, which is a huge plus as well. So.
Can I make one more plug for the savings plans that folks are offering out there? Because we do awesome down payment assistance, but if you have flexible cash when you go into a home purchase that you've saved up in one of these savings accounts, that is going to be your ace in the hole when you go into an attempt to buy this house. I can give you $20,000 of money that you don't have to repay, but when you have that flexible money outside of that down payment, it's going to be a game changer in your ability to enter those negotiations and do that purchase. Sorry.
Oh, that's perfect. Thanks, Robin. I appreciate that you mentioned that there is a lot of layering that can happen, because there are so many resources out there, and what one household might be able to qualify for, they might qualify for something else. So it's great to know that those can maybe work together to make it happen. So thank you. And I now want to ask Heather if you would mention or bring up that what Utah Community Action can do for those who might be struggling to pay their rent, if there's any kind of assistance that can be given in that aspect.
Yes, of course. There's actually quite a lot of grants. We're a grant-based organization, so we constantly have different flows of different grants, different requirements, different parameters. We have the normal grants that we were using and utilizing before COVID. And then of course, everybody's heard of the rent relief stuff that's statewide now. And that's also rental assistance COVID specific. You can access all of the rental assistance and deposit assistance programs through the UCA, it's utahca.org website, and then going to the housing yeah, I think it's housing and case management link, but there's an application link right there. The only one that isn't tied to that anymore as of March 15th is the rent relief, which is the big pot of money through the state that came from the new bill as of, again, the beginning of the year. So we still utilize that. We still do case management for any of the applications that come through the state portal, but just knowing that the application, what am I trying to say? Basically, you have to initiate the application in 2 different places. I did kind of check into some resources before this call just to make sure I was updated on everything, but we're definitely directing a lot of traffic towards our website. Obviously, there's heat assistance, there's Head Start, all kinds of different programs. The website will have all of that. But again, there is a lot of grants coming right now that can assist to kind of fill in the gray areas of maybe it's COVID, maybe it's not. Even if it is COVID, I would still apply in both places. Just knowing that there's actually some pretty wide-spanning funding that's covering a lot more things, even more than the usual, in both places. So I don't know how much in depth you want me to go on that, but that's really where to go and what to do to get in front of any kind of crisis that you're dealing with.
Perfect. That was, yeah, thank you. So I guess really quick too, before I go on to the next question, Heidi or Rob, Heidi or Kevin, did you want to add anything that maybe your organizations provide in terms of, not just housing assistance, but maybe other assistance that might benefit?
Yeah, so the Family Support Center has 3 different main resources, or just different communities. So we have a clinical department that accepts Medicaid for clinical services, or they'll do a sliding scale fee. So we can usually work people in regardless if they have insurance or not. We want to make sure everyone has access to that. We also have the crisis nurseries, 3 of them around Salt Lake County. And that is a place where if you need a break from being a mom, you want to go grocery shopping without your kids, you need to go house hunting, you need to go to a job interview, you can just call one of our crisis nurseries and we'll take care of your kids while you get that done. It's stressful doing all of these different things, navigating all these resources with your kids. So we would love to have them and help you with that if needed. We also, like with Life Start Villages, I just want to put it out there that we can accept anyone we overlook most backgrounds. It's not something that will prevent you from moving into our facility. The only thing that we can overlook is if you're the perpetrator of domestic violence. But I can look past evictions, criminal history usually. We want to meet people where they're at and just help them grow from there. So we don't have any application fees, nothing like that. We're not going to pull your credit. Yeah, we just want to help everyone succeed, I guess. Like I just come from a place where I went through a lot of the struggles that people go through when they're accessing these services. Like I've used community action program. We utilize the resources here a lot, the road home. All of these different resources. So yeah, we're just here to help.
Thank you. Kevin, do you want to add anything?
Sure. I know, I think community-wide, the Road Home is more looked at as more of just like a shelter type agency, providing shelter for homeless individuals and families. But we actually currently are operating, I think, 16 different federal housing grants for veterans, families, singles, individuals or families that might be experiencing chronic homelessness, rapid rehousing. We have just like kind of everything across the board. This probably isn't the greatest place to share this, but we're actually in the process of, we think as a community that we are really close to getting to a point where we can offer financial services to any family in the world or not in the world, any family in the county that is experiencing homelessness. We can intervene with a financial intervention if that's what they need. What we really try and do is when we are serving somebody in a housing program, we try really hard to make sure that the person or the household that we're serving is really driving you know, how they want this intervention to look like or what they really need. And so a lot of times, you know, we'll help somebody move out on rapid rehousing, but we don't have a set amount of assistance that people will receive. A lot of times we will help a family or an individual move into a place and they'll just start thriving automatically, and they were maybe pretty high barriered, and all they really needed was their own bathroom and their own like roof over their head and a door that can lock. And then all of a sudden, you know, a lot of things start opening up and get better for these people. And then there are other times where, you know, we'll see people that are in shelter that, you know, are seemingly, you know, aren't going to need too much assistance from us, but then they do kind of require maybe more long-term case management while they're in one of our housing programs. So we really do it on a case-by-case basis. Every month, you know, they're meeting with their case managers, going over their budgets, figuring out if they're going to be able to pay rent the next month. And if they are able to pay rent the next month, then we stop our payment and let them know that they can call us back anytime. If they aren't confident that they'll be able to make their next month rent, then we are able to, you know, leave them on one of our programs until they are feeling more comfortable to maybe graduate from the program. We call it progressive engagement. So really we're just trying, we start with the lightest like intervention first, and then as the person or family that we're serving kind of shows the need that they need more assistance, then we'll kind of ramp up our services too. So, and not all of these programs are designated for literally homeless households. With the COVID money or the CARES money that's come in, the HUD and the federal government have opened up their requirements. So now we're actually able to serve more households that might just be paying for their own hotel, which wouldn't qualify under literal homelessness. But obviously if you're paying for a hotel and you don't have a home, you're still homeless. So we've been able to expand our programs that way in just the last couple of years. Mostly through coordinated entry, Heather. So they have coordinated entry groups that meet weekly to discuss the different populations, whether it's single individuals, families, or veterans. And then they can get lined up. There's a couple different outreach teams if they aren't staying in shelter that can be deployed to wherever the household might be staying. Or obviously if they're staying in shelter, then they'll have a case manager that can help them navigate through that process too. Word vomit.
Thank you. So I want to open it up again. Any live questions that those that are present need answered? Feel free to put it in the chat or to unmute yourself. Okay, I want, before we close, I have one more question to ask. It kind of circles back to the very beginning when we talked about housing and how housing education is so important, whether you're renting or whether you're buying, to be prepared. So be prepared to be the best tenant you could possibly be, or to be the best candidate for home buying. So Brian, will you talk about what CDCU might have in terms of housing education or preparing for home ownership? And then Rob, will you go right after about what NeighborWorks has?
Sure, thank you, Mackenzie. So at CDCU, we are a HUD-approved housing counseling agency. And currently, we kind of restructured our counseling program to include financial stability as well as housing stability. So, you know, we recognize that maybe it's not time for everyone to purchase now, but first you have to get your back on your feet and financially strong, which can lead into your goal of becoming a homeowner. So our program basically is designed to have a budget class that will cover, you know, budgeting strategies, how to improve in that aspect. Then we have a counseling session that follows that one-on-one to get more personal into the client situation. And then we have a credit class, you know, making sure that people understand credit better. What are some of the things that can be done to increase that score, which, as I mentioned before, if you definitely increase your score into the 700s or high 700s, then your interest rate is going to be optimal, and you save money in the long run. And then we follow that by another counseling session to cover personal details on people's credit. So we help them review their credit score, the credit history, and really create an action plan for them. We do have a booklet that has a lot of resources, you know, worksheets on how to do a budget on a spreadsheet, on Excel, on Word, Microsoft Word. We have websites, you know, you can use your banking apps. So, you know, we definitely want to empower people to have all this information, because, you know, that's really ultimately what gives people power. Like, you know, I have all the information I need to make a better decision and better choices. And then we have our regular home buyer education. Right now it's mostly online, and that's really targeted to cover the entire purchase process, where you know, it talks about the real estate side, the lending side, after you purchase, post-purchase, you know, there's things that you need to be mindful as a homeowner. And that course is at your own pace. It's about 4 hours to complete. A lot of knowledge. Oftentimes we hear people say, oh, I wish I took that course before I purchased, because I realized all these things that I could have taken advantage of, or I would have been aware. And honestly, the purchase process can be intimidating. You know, you have to sign a lot of loan documents. You have to sign contracts with real estate. So we help you and guide you through understanding that better. And then, you know, you have people that are experts in those fields and are by your side to assist you. So I think that covers the majority there.
I would echo everything that Brian just said. More of what I just said at the beginning, which is become an expert if you're going to be a home buyer. The resources that he's talking about are excellent. I would say with NeighborWorks Salt Lake, when it comes to home buyer education, we have online courses that are HUD approved that I would take a look at, in part because of what Brian said. Not only just becoming a professional at this, as close as you can get when you get into the home buying process, knowing all the ins and outs. But honestly, lenders like seeing that you've done a home buyer education course. These are official HUD approved courses that you can take at your own pace through our website. We do discount codes all the time. Sometimes it's 50% off the cost of these courses. Sometimes it's 100% off free home buyer education courses that are HUD approved. This is not a moneymaker for us. We just want folks to take these courses and become educated. Even if you end up going and getting a loan or purchasing a house from somebody else, we're just happy to see you taking the course. But I would just, you know, I would really just encourage anybody, any of these resources, in-person housing counseling from CDCU, homebuyer education online, any of these and financial counseling. You should be looking at this as many different avenues as you can seek out for education. Like I said, I'm a recent home buyer, and one of the things, it's a very intimidating process, but it's a really interesting process too. Like, there's so many weird little things in the process of buying a home that's so different than any other purchase that you'll make in your life. I would just really encourage you, be curious, ask a lot of questions. Don't just take what your realtor says or what your lender says on fact. Ask them why does that work this way? Why is this so weird? And understand it, because it's the biggest purchase that it may be the biggest purchase that you're ever going to make, investment in your life. So be curious about it and arm yourself with education.
Is it normal to cry a little bit during the home purchasing experience?
I still have PTSD.
Okay, I'm like, because I never want to do it again, and it's like, It's not supposed to be your forever home, but it was brutal.
Me and my girlfriend still are shaking our heads, and we're still a little in shock. And I was pretty well prepared, but that's not to say that it's an impossible thing. It's just a hard thing. And when you're making a financial decision that's this big, it's easy to get overwhelmed, but it should be hard. And if it's easy, then maybe you're not looking at it closely enough. And it will be a feeling of accomplishment when it's done, and you'll be able to look back and be like, if I ever do this again, I will do it better. I will learn from it. But it's an experience for sure. And yeah, you may shed a few tears.
I have another question real quick. What is it? Do you guys recommend refinancing during a time like this?
I can take that, Rob, first stab. So definitely consider it, because interest rates are still historic low. They started to go up a little, but not nearly to the levels that they used to be 2 years ago. It makes sense when you at least reduce your interest rate by 1%. So take a look at that. And also you can reduce the term, and your payments might stay the same, and financing costs over the life of the loan, you save a lot of money. So definitely a sound decision to explore. And I think there was definitely an uptick in refinances over the last few months. Like it was just busy with refinancing, because yeah, people went from, I would say 4.5% to 2.5%. So it makes a lot of sense, as long as all your finances are steady, you don't foresee any big changes, then definitely consider it.
Do you guys help with that?
So we help in terms of taking a look. We used to have mortgage operations, but that went away for us. But we do have lenders that we have relationships with, and once we assess your situation, we can refer you there. I'm not sure if NeighborWorks also has lending operations. They could take a look as well. So yeah, both of us could be a resource for that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, we are similar. I mean, we do refinancing. We have a loan portfolio. We are a nonprofit bank for all intents and purposes. So we have a loan portfolio, and we do refinancing with some of our clients. What I would say, definitely if you can look into it, what I would say just as a tip for folks that are shopping around for lenders, period, before you get into that, if you get a lender that keeps their portfolio in-house, if you eventually want to refinance, that makes your life way easier. So that's just something to throw out there. I always have that in your document. Talk to a financial advisor, and then you can go to your lender and decide if it makes sense.
Awesome. Thank you. That was my own personal monitor.
It looks like Heather asked a question as well. Like, what are the parameters for the foreclosure holds or moratoriums as they exist now? Do either of you have an answer for that one?
I'll go. So as it stands, the latest word on that is that forbearance protection ends at the end of June of this year. There has been some conversation. I was trying to find the source of where I saw this. I thought I might have seen it at the CFPB or maybe a HUD article. They're having conversation of extending it till the end of the year, December 31st, but that's not official, and really we can't rely on that. So as it stands, it's until the end of June of this year, and after that, the lenders can start to really press you on, you're behind. Foreclosure proceedings usually start 3 months after. They have to give you notices. So really, we might start to see some crisis happening in November. Hopefully people try to get some help before. Something that we didn't get to mention is that we have mortgage assistance programs to help current homeowners. We've fortunately received funding from multiple cities. Right now we have Salt Lake City, South Jordan, Taylorsville, and Sandy. And our assistance helps with 1 to 3 months of mortgage payments up to $5,000. if they've been affected by COVID-19 or just experiencing financial hardship. So that's what I know for that matter.
Great. So the last housing education piece I wanted to make sure that we discuss is the class that I know Heather is a part of, and I don't know if she's still the one teaching it, but it's a tenant education class. So Heather, would you briefly discuss that?
Absolutely. So we had a pause. We had a COVID pause. That's gonna be the long-standing term, the COVID pause. We actually didn't utilize it prior to COVID virtually. So as of we're getting ready to basically break it back open. We've done some one-offs. We've done some that have grant requirements for tenants or landlords that require or request tenants to have this education with the tenant toolkit. So that's still what we're utilizing. As of right now, a lot of tenants go on, it's virtual. They can basically take an assessment, get a certificate from the assessment. That's what we've been doing pretty much through the last 6 to 8 months. There's been some set asides with some agencies that have requested some sort of training with it for sometimes service coordinators, different agencies, different groups, and even groups of tenants that we've done. So it's kind of just been at request or per agency or per crisis, if you will, right? Because there's always a crisis. But the main thing that we're within the next 30 days, we're going to actually have Zoom sessions like this. So we have a strategic agenda, questions, answers, pretty much everything that we were doing in person is going to be virtual. I'm hoping that at least by the 1st of May, we're going to try to set 3 solid dates per month to do this. And so people can refer tenants. There's a lot of speed right now with schools wanting this education, helping to, whether it's schools, secondary schools, basically giving this information to juniors and seniors that are going into the market as renters or even home buyers, and then also some sort of like adult education type of classes where we can get into their curriculum. So there's a lot of good things that are happening. So keep your ears open. If you have any inlets where you would want this type of tenant, it's not just tenant, it's honestly tenant landlord driven education that helps to, dissect how to read a lease, how to communicate effectively, building the landlord-tenant relationship, understanding types of eviction notices, what to do with the court process, access to justice, those types of things. But yeah, within the next 30 days, we're actually going to have some pretty good targets. And there's some other agencies that are trying to do the same thing, kind of based around the same toolkit. That tenant toolkit is actually put through Utah Housing Coalition. It's on their website as well. You can also utilize it under resources with our agency, so utahca.org, and a lot of other folks use it. We're trying to get the actual hard copies into libraries, resource centers, especially schools, resource centers in schools, just so everybody has this type of information to understand it and then at least know where to start asking good questions and how to understand leases. And even though there's a lot of crying, and I know you said it, there's a lot of crying in home buying, there's a lot of crying in leasing too. Because basically people they read maybe the first 5 to 7 pages of a lease, and leases used to actually be 5 to 7 pages, and now they're upwards of 20 to 30 pages. So there's still, some crying and renting as well. So if I can help to, remediate that and clear the mud, so to speak, that's kind of what my agenda is. Especially working through the COVID stuff. We're having a lot of folks that haven't really had any experience whatsoever with the eviction crises, or let alone homelessness, and hopefully getting through the COVID crisis and not leading to homelessness. That's the goal, right, Kevin? Overall, but if we can help to educate along the way, hopefully prior to the court processes, it'll at least catching the upstream is really the overall goal for all of us, I think. So that's pretty much what we're doing. That's what we're going to be doing. And pretty much between now and the end of the year, there's a huge education push for that. So cross your fingers and wish us luck. So.
Thank you, Heather.
No problem.
I can echo what everyone has said, which is education is really important, and a majority of these classes do give a certificate at the end. So use that certificate to your advantage. You know, take it to when you do apply for apartment complexes and say, hey, I've been, you know, educated in regards to, you know, being the best tenant that I can. And the same goes for when you're purchasing a home, that home buyer education. So we're going to wrap it up. Are there any other questions from those who are participating today, or you can put in the chat or unmute yourselves? Now is the time to speak while we have everyone present. Crickets. Okay, I thought we would have a little bit more interaction today, but please know that I know in the chat there was some conversation going on as to whether or not you could get these access to these slides or this presentation. We will put this presentation as we have recorded it on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and refer to it. If you're interested in the slides themselves, so you can have these individual contact information, please email us at info@faircredit.org and we can get that to you. And make sure that you are connected to those that you need in order to get the assistance or the education that you're seeking. So we really, really appreciate you attending today. Thanks to all of our panelists for making it happen. And please join us for any of our other monthly webinars that we do. We have different topics that we talk on from month to month, but this one we particularly chose housing because of the fair housing. So thanks again for joining us, and have a good rest of your day and week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you guys for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks to all our speakers as well. You guys were great.